during the break, I thought about all these, well, I don't know. I'm tripping over my own words already because there's about like 10 different places that I want to start. With respect to Connie's policy question, right now between El Paso, Las Cruces, Juarez, our area, there's a lot of talk going on about the US EPA Urban Waters Program, and we're looking for an Urban Waters Ambassador. And Albuquerque's got one, or Bernalillo County's got one.
Yes, you did. So Albuquerque had one, and one of the issues was because it goes year to year, by the time the person figured out what they were doing, they were gone. And so Albuquerque, Bernalillo County's urban water person is now housed in CUDAD Soil and Water Conservation District so that you can have the year-to-year continuity.
Right, there's like an institutional memory. So the Urban Waters Program is a thing that we're trying to get started down here. So if you work for an agency and you want to promote smart use of water and water conservation and all the good things water, consider getting your agency to fund or host the Urban Waters Ambassador person. That's one good thing. Okay, so that was a plug for the Urban Waters thing. I wanted to just kind of start with this one really quick. This is an Instagram post. So my daughter works with our company, High Desert Native Plants. This is a curb cord that we installed at a relatively prominent neighborhood and several years ago, and it was raining just the other day, and Sydney ran out and grabbed a video for Instagram, and I want to play it. Oops, there he goes. And actually, let's see. Oh, I have it muted. So, just a few, as this video plays, this is just showing, this is a remarkably large watershed with a very large yard. It has 7 very large stormwater, rainwater harvesting basins in the parkway. The parkway is 30 feet wide. The parkway is as big as this room, and it goes down for the whole length of the house. Lots of opportunity for water harvesting, and if you see the, as the water is flowing down, by the time it gets to the third basin, the water's already all soaked in. This was an Instagram post. Check it out. We're like at 3 million views with this video.
Dang.
It's crazy. It was like 2.5 million views a couple of weeks ago. I think we're up, and at the rate it was accelerating, we're at 3 million views right now. So I'm all really excited because we have like a viral rainwater harvesting video, right?
Right on.
Worldwide. But check out the first comment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mosquitoes love you. Oh, the laser doesn't work.
No, that's what we're pointing.
The first comment. Mosquitoes love you. We spent 4 weeks responding to questions about mosquitoes, oils and greases and dog poo and all the things that we were talked about. That's why I asked you that question. So if you want, this post actually has pretty good references to, this is a scientific paper now, this Instagram post. I've got resources and citations of studies that have been done that show that the oils and greases and stuff that come off of stormwater get biodigested into the soils, get used by the microbiology, actually help support the soil food web, all the stuff going on. We patiently replied to hundreds and hundreds of people. People started commenting on how patient we are commenting on these things. The overwhelming response to this video is, wow, this is really cool. This is a really great idea. I wish we could do this in our town, blah, blah, blah. Check it out. This one is, the homeowner found this. And she's like, hey, this is my house. They do not. She went on there. She's like, we don't have mosquitoes. The water just goes where it needs to go, and it never ponds. We live in a very dry desert. This has helped keep our watering efforts to a minimum, considering these are native trees. We did build an irrigation system in with this yard. It's actually a irrigation system that collects rainwater off of the roof and uses that rainwater. And the homeowner didn't hire us to do maintenance for a long time. So for like the first 2 years, the irrigation system didn't work. That desert willow didn't care. Like it's just getting stormwater off of the street. There's a whole bunch of trees going down the street on this property from the passive rainwater harvesting. It's a really cool project. Anyway, just wanted to plug things and share it and just kind of start my presentation with that one. Okay, I'm kind of going off of a presentation that I did for the City of El Paso Developers Focus Group for the City Plan Commission. And also another one for the Open Space Advisory Board. And so before I did the presentation for them, I sent out a survey to the City Plan Commission people and the developers that I knew that were going to be participating in this presentation. Had I had my act together, I would have sent you all the same survey. But let's just interactively do it now. Okay, before today, are you familiar with green infrastructure and low impact development? Show of hands. Okay, most of the room. Do you guys think it's a good idea for our city being Las Cruces? Everybody's, all right, we got a few shaking hands. A couple people are just not responding back there. That's okay. How many people in the room, enthusiastically show of hands, how many people in the room have implemented green infrastructure on a project that they've been involved in? 1, 2. Holy cow, that's a great portion of the room. That's really good. That's a great response. That's like at least 30% of you. Was it successful? Oh.
Half successful.
Half, couple of hands trying to creep up. Were there roadblocks?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. For those of you that are not answering on this, know that there will be roadblocks. Okay, I'm not going to talk about the obstacles, but maybe anybody want to shout out what are some of the reasons or motivation, what would motivate you to use green infrastructure on a project?
Water use. Free. Free water use.
Free water use would motivate you to implement green infrastructure.
The coolest thing is to cruise around looking at your projects when they're flowing. It's like magic. It's so much fun.
I think that so Van said that the coolest thing is to watch your projects flow. I totally agree. And I think that the Instagram algorithm on our video picked up on that flowing water because, yeah, it's captured in there. It really is. Shade. We live in hot, dry desert cities. Shade is a big deal. Green infrastructure is free water for trees, which can cool sidewalks. Everybody knows, it's been long established that trees improve property values in neighborhoods. We're learning more about how trees reduce pollution and reduce the urban heat island effect. Because of all of the impervious surfaces we've created in our urban environment, we can use that free water to irrigate trees in our landscaped spaces. And so that creates shade. So that should help motivate people to do things. The survey that I did, it said almost half the respondents. So basically our survey showed up a little bit better than the survey I did in El Paso. Almost half of the respondents have actually used green infrastructure, and most said it was at least moderately successful. Those that not have implemented GI want to do so. Everybody wants to learn more. We all need to learn more. And I think that's one of the things that Van and I find when we do these presentations is that this is a philosophy, an industry, and a sector that's that's growing and has yet to mature in terms of our knowledge base of what we're doing. And so I think that there's still a promising future for green infrastructure in this region. Davina and I were talking about the fact that this generation of folks is coming in and we're in charge now. And there's people that are in charge that are interested in this stuff, and we want to see it moving forward. So we just have a lot of work to do to get there. The first half of my slideshow is very text heavy, and I'm going to very quickly zip through it because I don't want to sit here and read all these slides, okay? But for the benefit of when you go back and look at this slideshow later, because we will make this available to you, we'll send it out to you. There's a lot of facts and links and things like that in this slideshow that'll give you some more resources. Van already kind of went over some of the green infrastructure basics, so I'm going to zip through there, but I'm going to hit the EPA definition of them. The range of measures, green infrastructure is the range of measures that use plant or soil systems, permeable pavement, or other permeable surfaces or substrates, stormwater harvest and reuse, or landscaping to store, infiltrate, or evapotranspirate stormwater and reduce flows to sewer systems or surface waters. That's the US EPA's definition of green infrastructure in the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. This is a green infrastructure stormwater harvesting basin off of Country Club Road in El Paso, Texas. These are all real fancy little curb cuts on a fairly narrow street, bringing water in to irrigate these trees. Pretty cool execution of green infrastructure there. Again, I'm gonna really zip through this. What is green infrastructure? Well, this is that yard that was in the Instagram video. The curb cut that we saw in that Instagram video is up there by that very cool Mini Cooper parked up on the street there. The water comes in. We only have one little tiny curb court, and it comes in. It's such a large watershed that these 7 basins fill up. But we've got organic mulch. We've got rock strategically placed to act as a filter to prevent the migration or the unwanted movement or loss of that organic mulch. We're using native trees in the rainwater harvesting basins that will be irrigated. This is about a year after the thing was built. We've got a permeable surface, a permeable walking surface. You know, it's a flagstone path that's not set in concrete. It's all just dry set in sand. And notice that the water flows over the surface on this walking path. About 4 days out of the year, you have to skip over the thing because there's water flowing there. It's more than 4 days a year, but same yard. Oh my goodness, this picture looks funny when it's blown up so big. Same yard. Actually, Van showed a really cool picture of taking out all of that concrete out of a parkway. We used that concrete. It's got a really cool name, Urbanite. Anybody ever heard of Urbanite? Yeah. Reusing the concrete to make a footpath. Unfortunately, we ran out of Urbanite, so we had to just go to a gravel path. Oh, okay. So here we are trying to capture water on the private property before it even gets to the public streets, right? We're trying to keep the water as high up in the watershed as possible. This is a church on a hill in West El Paso, and this is an interesting site because remember the first rule of water harvesting, or the second rule of rainwater harvesting, is start at the top of your watershed. It turns out that this church, the property, it is at the top of the watershed. It's actually it's right on this little prominence of a plateau, and it kind of is at the top of the watershed. But the church itself has this giant roof and these sloping slopes. And so we got in there with a little tiny excavator and built all this series of berms and basins to control the flow of water and trying to irrigate the trees in the parking lot with the storm water that's coming off of the roof of the building. Here's some green infrastructure examples that are being built on highways. It's really interesting because somebody at TxDOT, somebody at the Texas Department of Transportation is promoting green infrastructure because these facilities are being built on like new developments that are happening on some of the TxDOT highways. They're being built with on-site ponding, stormwater retention that's coming off of the street. The reason why I'm showing these pictures now is because I want to talk about a little bit later some best management practices to improve the way these features work. Van showed a lot of really cool pictures of stormwater flowing through residential properties and stuff. I'm going to look at a little bit more stuff in the public realm, in the highway right-of-ways. I think this picture is showing up a little bit prematurely, but this was a cool one. I watched this this is like right around the corner from my house, and they took out this commercial property and they redeveloped it and they built a little strip mall there, and they started building this rainwater harvesting basin in the parkway in front of this commercial property. And I thought, wow, that's really, really cool. That's very exciting. And then the landscaper came and put in all this rock, and all this rock went into the wrong places. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And you can see this is all like big riprap rock that was put along the side of the curb. Well, prior to this picture being taken, I watched it, and when the landscaper put all this rock in, they put it up and it blocked the curb cuts that they had installed. And so all of this water was just staying there on Donovan Drive. Well, one day I was driving down the road in the rain, and I just couldn't take it anymore, so I got my shovel out and I finished their job for them. And this thing is collecting water like gangbusters, and this little shrub, there's several of them in the water harvesting basin. They're like trees now. They're like smaller trees. It's growing very quickly. And this was installed in about 4 years ago, I guess. Although these basins collect stormwater, there is room for improvement in their implementation. And where we're going with that is that we talked about building the soil sponge, turning these things into sponges. Well, the way these things are built, they're not going to become sponges because they are built with weed barrier fabric, which will clog with the sediment that comes in off of the streets. And then they're also built with, in this particular case, this one is built with screenings, gravel screenings or chat or some, decomposed granite. There's, all crusher fines. There's like 4 or 5 different names for that stuff, but it's like the real fine gravel material, and that's going to seal up, and it's going to make it more difficult for the water to soak in. And then what do we have? We have a mosquito problem. So while this is green infrastructure, it's not rainwater harvesting that uses the principles that we talked about earlier that Brad Lancaster developed that address the questions that Vina brought up where there's failures. And I think that it's really important for those of us in this room, because we have decision makers and designers and regulators and people that are going to be watching these types of things. It's really important for you guys to understand the difference between well executed and poorly executed green infrastructure and rainwater harvesting. And understand that just because there's a few mistakes doesn't mean we should block off our rainwater harvesting inlets. We need to go back and make sure that we install our rainwater harvesting projects correctly. Okay, a bunch of slides that talk about all the great things green infrastructure does. It brings down our average temperatures. we saw this picture earlier. This is the degenerative scenario versus the regenerative scenario. A whole bunch of links and references and sources, information that just proves that it's not just me and Van up here talking about it. The whole country, a lot of people around the world are looking at this stuff. Policy, regulations, incentives. To speak to Rhonda's point, this water is coming down for free. And if you build your water harvesting basins correctly, the ISC won't come and tell you that you're violating state laws. Case studies, lots of case studies and benefits analysis that shows that green infrastructure does good stuff. There's stuff in Tucson, in Phoenix, in Los Angeles, other desert cities that are like ours. Here's a very complex graph that shows the triple bottom line, which is the net present value of financial, social, and environmental impacts of bioswales and bioretention basins. You see that the triple bottom line is all above the zero axis here, whereas as you get into concrete infrastructure, a lot of the economic side is below, and the social and environmental benefits of those types of infrastructure features are very, very low compared to green infrastructure. Oh my God, I have so much text. Excuse me. All right, let's talk about some fun stuff.
All right.
Yeah. This is actually the Stream Dynamics crew that High Desert borrowed to build some of our curb cores at a city park in El Paso, where we got funding from the National Recreation Parks Association, the National Recreational Parks Association. This is already a park pond. It's pretty cool. It's a stormwater pond that's designed to be a soccer field when it's not flooded with water. But we decided to capture some stormwater one little level higher up in the watershed and bring water into the parkways where the water was, where the trees and stuff are up in the parkway. And so we drilled a curb core. Anybody can do it. I mean, you know, these are cool machines and everything, but anybody can run a curb core.
Where did you get that machine? Did you rent it?
That one was a rental. And so what we've done is, okay, so we're drilling a curb core, and you'll notice the difference is that on this one, we're coming from the back side of the curb in order to do it, and that's so that we can get that really cool little dip that kind of captures the water and swishes it in there a little bit better. For a long time, we were doing that by drilling backwards from the backside of the curb and angling the drill up to come out. Since then, Van's come up with this really cool rig that does it from this side of the curb, from the street side of the curb. We can just go plunk the machine down, angle it just right, and go bzzz, and get it in there. Because that's a lot of setup. That was a very expensive curb cut. We've got our process down now. We're like, before the first coffee break in the morning, we can get a curb cut or two done. The principles of rainwater harvesting are a framework for effective green infrastructure. Van already went through them. I have a whole 5-hour-long presentation that I try to squeeze down into an hour about the principles of water harvesting and all the good stuff about it. Links to technical guidance so that when you guys are looking at this later, you can just click these links and this will take you to some really good information. But this is my mantra. This is what I want people to really start understanding. And I think that after today, with any luck, if Van and I have done our jobs after this 2 days, every time you go to Walmart and park and you're looking for a parking space underneath a shady tree and you realize that only 3 cars are allowed to park underneath that tiny little tree, you'll realize that there is a lot of opportunity to change the way that parking lot is built so that every landscape space in the public realm can be an opportunity for green infrastructure. With any luck, you're going to start seeing that everywhere you go. You're going to see that there's a stormwater inlet right next to a curb where there's an entrance into a park, and there's a dying tree, a dying non-native tree, watching all this water go down the drain when it rains the 5 times a year that it does in our town. We've had a good rainy year this year, so it's good. Every landscape space in the public realm is an opportunity for green infrastructure. Look, there's a really cute example. A little bit. What are we doing with our roundabouts right now? Has anybody been at the roundabout on Vado? There's like these really cool roundabouts at the I-10 interchange at Vado, right? They're built like way up. They're these giant islands, you know? They're these giant islands. In El Paso, this is a roundabout in Tucson. In El Paso, we went on this roundabout craze for a couple of years. And every roundabout is this concrete bump in the middle of a tiny little intersection that's just coated in tire tracks. Here's a really cool retrofit, a stormwater retrofit that was done. Again, this is an example from a street in Tucson. I wish I could claim that we did this, but we're trying to do stuff like this. This is mostly organic mulch. This is actually mostly organic mulch. The only place where they have rocks is where the erosion might happen, where the water's coming in very quickly off of the street. They've got rock right there to prevent the erosion. And then as this thing fills up, because there's a water harvesting inlet right there. As this one fills up, it pours over this weir and it joins this water, and there's that little erosion control. There's a sediment clean out trap right here, and then it goes down and there's organic mulch in there.
Mike, before you, that one's mine too. For a city, what would they need to plan for as far as maintenance and maintaining it to where it stays looking nice, it's appealing for citizens, and it functions? What would the city's maintenance requirements be to have this?
Davina's question is really good, and Davina's question is what does the maintenance on a thing like this look like? What we're doing with this kind of infrastructure is just changing the way we do our maintenance. Mm-hmm. Every built thing needs to be maintained, right? Well, it should be maintained. Every built thing needs to be maintained. We maintain our front yards. Currently, at least from what I've seen, my observations, the way medians and things are currently maintained is, well, first off, the weeds are allowed to grow till you can't see across the street. And then somebody comes in and cuts them down. And then that's followed by a chemical truck that comes and sprays them down with toxic ink and poisons that wash off and flow into our waterways. And what this does is this changes that with any luck. This changes that. So basically the weed maintenance is the same. You come in and chop the weeds down if you need to. The sediment that gets accumulated here might need to be shoveled out, and maybe it could be replaced back into the same landscape. Maybe it could be moved somewhere else in the landscape. I'm going to talk about maintenance a little bit more too. I think we just need to shift the way our maintenance is done. This is around the corner. Oh, this is really cool. Obviously, they knew that the water was going somewhere, right? Because they built in stormwater infrastructure. So they went in and did a retrofit to create a water situation going into the landscape. Really, really cool retrofit.
Can you go back one slide?
Yeah.
To the forward one. So
Which one?
forward to that last slide you were at. There. No more. Forward. There. Hold there. So, which cost more? Putting it into a culvert system under the roadway to who knows where? Or letting it go under the sidewalk into a little depressional area? So the retrofit, like what we need to do is we need to stop right now putting it into a underground storm sewer system. Just forget about that. Don't you engineer any more of those, you know what I'm saying? Because this other thing is better, faster, easier, cheaper, and everything all the way around. Easier to maintain. Has a fail-safe failure mode.
Until you have a sufficient rainfall event that overwhelms that and then you flood the road.
All right, so let's not get into the weeds on all the flooding problems because flooding happens.
But the water won't get to there if we're all capturing it every place we can. The reason we have a stormwater problem is because we have created one. And so if we stop creating it and we can make the problem smaller, dumping it into the storm sewer increases downstream flooding. It's not part of the solution. It's a very fundamental reason why there's a problem to begin with.
Okay, I'm going to carry on.
Sorry, excuse me.
Thanks. Van and I both have lots and lots and lots of pictures of curb cuts and dirt and water. But here's a couple of fun pictures. Now that you've seen all these cool things, and I was telling you, look at that, right? If, as Van was just now saying, if we're harvesting water every chance we get and we're turning every landscape space in the public realm into a water harvesting opportunity, the chances of this kind of thing happening go down. They're reduced. I think, good opportunity there for water harvesting basins here. The flip side of this picture is there's construction going on I-10 in the background there, and all of that muddy water is coming through a blown out silt fence. And what is silt fence anyway? Future trash. Improper design. This was a green infrastructure landscape that was installed on a street, on a commercial property, on a street that when I was growing up, I remember watching people float down this street in rafts and kayaks. Lots of fun. The problem with this one is you have uncontrolled inlets to the green infrastructure space. A green infrastructure space that was not built with enough capacity to hold much of anything. And organic wood bark mulch that was placed on top of an impermeable weed barrier fabric. So it all just washed away. It all just washed away because we didn't have the proper shape to our basins. We didn't have the proper controls. But they spent a ton of money on building it because they brought in all the fancy stuff, The solution to this would be if they would have finished this off with the curbs that are pretty typical and then allowed the inlets to have a controlled inlet, which would allow a stormwater sediment basin to be built that would then slowly flow that water out to basins with larger capacity. And then if that organic wood bark mulch was allowed to be in direct contact with the soil, it would allow the fungus, the soil food web, to develop. And then that wood bark mulch would actually bind itself together and hold itself in place.
Like, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
By saying that, do you think a lot of the problem with, we'll say city design, is that we don't really know what the design should be until we're on site? And I think that applies even to anything, things change in the field. But do you think that's an issue?
I do think that's an issue. I've got another really good picture that's not in this slideshow of rainwater harvesting curb cuts on a parking lot that were supposed to bring water into the landscape. I think that the designer from their cubicle misread the topographic lines because it's water coming out of the landscape onto the street instead of coming off of the street into the landscape. These are things that are happening, and it's the challenge is that at every step of the way, everybody from the guy that designed this in an office somewhere to the person that installed it on the ground needs to have some sort of understanding of what the objective is, I think. And I recognize that's a challenge. Here's a real common scenario. This exists all over Las Cruces. This one in particular is in El Paso, but this situation exists all over Las Cruces. And while this is on-site ponding, it's water harvesting in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't use the best management practices that we'd like to see because it puts riprap, which is made for erosion control. Like when we think about where we would use riprap, where's the engineer in the room? Can I pick on an engineer in the room? Come on, you guys had your hands up earlier. All right, anybody want to venture to guess, where would you put riprap on a project? Where do you see riprap on a highway project? Where do you see riprap?
Slopes and erosive areas.
Slopes and erosive areas. Why?
Because it dissipates it breaks up the energy and dissipates it. And
It's a larger particle. It takes more energy to get it to move on a slope. You've got a lot of energy coming down. The riprap isn't going to move with that energy, right? What is the environment at the bottom of a pond?
It's pretty still.
It's pretty still at the bottom of a pond. What happens when water is still?
it settles and settles.
It settles, right? Any of you ever did the soil shakeout test where you put some soil in a glass of water and you shake it, blah, 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 right? And then you set it down. What happens first? What's on the top after an hour or so? After 24 hours, what's on the top?
Organic. On the top is organic.
What's right below the organics?
Silt.
Or clay?
Well, clay's next, right?
Clay, well, no, clay, silt,
And sand.
and then sand, and then gravels and stuff, right? So the finer particles are the ones that settle out last at the bottom of the pond. What would you call this area? The bottom of the pond. That's the bottom of the pond. And what's in there? The biggest particles. So that means when the fine particles that are being transported by the water are coming in here and they're settling out, this is going to sediment in. And what's the maintenance solution for that?
You have to dig it out and wash it with soap.
I thought I had my slide.
Try to chunk your shovel into those big gravels and get nowhere.
Exactly. How much does riprap cost? Where does riprap come from? The mountain that used to be there. Instead of putting the finest gravel available to purchase in the areas where the stormwater flows, on this landscape they put instead of putting the correct gravel there, they put the finest gravel. So where did that gravel end up? It ended up at the bottom of the pond, and we have a torn up landscape. This is the same one on Donovan that I showed you where the rocks were put in front of the curb cut. If they had put all those rocks there, they wouldn't have an erosion problem and things would be working correctly. Also, the big offender, weed barrier fabric, not allowing the organic matter to have contact with the soil. So what's going to end up happening is this will eventually become a mosquito problem because those fines get stuck down there below all that gravel, and that causes the water to slow down in its infiltration. If you have organic matter on the soil, it creates a wet sponge, and that just soaks that water up right away. And you get those roots, and those roots pull water into the soil. Okay, there it is. There's the picture of the rock covering up the curb cuts. Yeah, and you can see that the stormwater basin is dry, and all the water is going down Donovan. I can tell you, Donovan is one of those streets that we need 10 of these for every property on Donovan, because Donovan used to be part of the edge of the Rio Grande. So yeah, we moved the rock out of the way. The water came into the neighborhood. And then you see their fake stream, right? Like, man, a lot of effort went into that. Like, have you guys seen these poor landscaper guys out there working and they're moving all this rock and they're doing that? And it's like, that should have been placed right there instead. And then they wouldn't have that problem. Instead, it's high and dry. Oh, look, there's Van moving rocks out of the way. Here's a funny picture of this is the house on Rim Road. I've been with the Instagram curb cut with its big giant trees. This is years later. The trees are real big. There's stormwater flowing down, and this curb cut is kind of on the leeward side of the thing, but it does manage to grab a little bit of water after Van moved the rocks out of the way to allow the water to come in. Here's a curb cut that we did just around the corner from that. Is a 10-foot wide parkway. Pretty typical. We actually dug this basin really deep. This basin had you can see the the grass lawn yard. This is this parkway had a grass lawn situation going that was like mounded up. You always see that, right, where the grass is mounded up. So it was shedding water instead of collecting water. We took out like 2 dump trucks full of dirt out of this tiny little parkway. And we dug it actually really deep because there's a big watershed here. So we dug it really deep because, as Brad Lancaster says, I have a greed for water. I want all that water. I can use that water better than the streets department can, And so we dug that really deep, and then we actually just filled it back in with organic mulch to compensate. So there's a whole lot of voids in there, with the organic mulch, there's a whole lot of voids. And so the person that's getting out of the car isn't going to fall into like a 3-foot deep trench in the parkway because it's all filled with mulch. So it holds a ton of water. The tree's on a planting shelf up in there. Sadly, this guy sold his house, and the new owner, I guess, didn't like all the wild landscape, which I get it. Not everybody wants all the honeybees cruising on the flowers in their front yard, and it kind of looks a little messy. So what he did is he went back in and took it all out. The basins are still there, but now it's all full of big river cobble. And the river cobble is cool. It looks really good. It's got a really nice clean look. But for 8 years, that site has been a stormwater harvesting living sponge. And the weeds that are going to come up through his rocks are going to hit him with a vengeance. And the poor dude's not going to know what to do. And he's going to go, gosh, maybe I should have just left it. Oh, here's a cool curb cut where we took out a parkway that was covered in concrete, and we turned around and we used that concrete to build a limestone cliff in the parkway to make a rainwater harvesting basin. They're even doing this in New York. This is a picture of a parking lot in Long Island in New York, and I was like, oh wow, cool. And you can see that this black car is parked over a curb cut, and there's a little green infrastructure basin there watering all those trees. It's a terrible picture. Sorry, we were on our way out to dinner and I wasn't thinking about work until it was time to work. Oh my God, my pictures are terrible. I'm sorry, they're all so blurry. This is one of the most recent rainwater harvesting projects we've done. This is the McCall Center in El Paso. This is on Wyoming Street. This street floods more than ankle deep in an inch of rain. It goes gangbusters. We put in 2 little curb cores and excavated a rainwater harvesting basin between 2 trees that are not doing so well. I took this picture yesterday. There's the curb core and the basin. It's full of wood mulch, and it rained we got about an inch of rain last week, and this is one of those where the water kind of comes in, comes back out. A little bit of wood mulch floated up. We lost a little bit. It's over here. This is gravel. Was existing gravel that we left in place, and so as the basin filled up, we lost a little bit of the wood mulch. But the wood mulch, I put this picture in to prove that if the thing is installed correctly and the water is allowed to be still and you've got gravel filters in place in the correct spots, the wood mulch stays in place. It doesn't go floating down the street. And if it does go, a little bit goes floating down the street, that's okay. It's just going to hopefully end up in your neighbor's rainwater harvesting basin. This is the one where we had the urbanite built into cliffs. This is this whole yard is a big giant rainwater harvesting basin. This guy basically gets out there and mows the weeds. Like the water harvesting basins are big enough that he can just get in there and like you would any grass lawn, you can just kind of get in there and mow it. And I kind of think that that's where we need to be thinking about taking our maintenance is we've built landscapes. Rhonda, to answer your question, the way we currently build our landscapes and our medians and stuff is such that it requires some sort of intensive maintenance because we use these big expensive rocks in the wrong places and stuff. If we were to just allow the water to come in and allow some plants to grow, we could get in there very easily with a conventional lawnmower and buzz that back down, and then we could even leave all of that material right there in the basin so it could decompose and be food for the next generation of plants to come up. A much more organic and non-polluting approach to the maintenance. And actually, this is something that I've adapted from a conversation that I had with Brad Lancaster, sharing these exact same frustrations, talking to him about, like, in whose lifetime is it going to be that we adopt rainwater harvesting? And he said, look, man, in our lifetimes, we've seen the change from the green grass lawn being the absolute required standard of a beautiful home to xeriscaping with gravel yards, water-saving things, using native plants generally. Now I think that water harvesting is the next step in our evolution of that. Now we know that using those quarried rocks and all that stuff is what's contributing to the heat island effect. In our effort to reduce our water consumption on grass, we've kind of swung the pendulum too far in the opposite direction where we're now drying out and baking with the landscapes that we're doing. At some point, we're going to swing back and start collecting that water into our landscape right where it falls and start cooling ourselves down. So our next step is water harvesting will be of major importance and part of solving many problems. Thank you.
Beautiful.
There was another picture I wanted to show you. Okay, more links. Oh, this is the wrong presentation. That's why. More links, the responses of the survey, lots of stuff. Any questions? Questions, please?
Stay up here with me.
I will.
Let's move into the next one, but let's not see it as moving into the next one. This is the discussion section, and as Nikki suggested, if you brought your lunch, you don't want to eat it in the car on the way to the next site, feel free to break it out, and have a nice leisurely moment. But so this section is really about trying to imagine, and on the agenda it talks about the future of green infrastructure for Las Cruces. And I know I was going to ask Peter Bennett actually to say a few words. There's some discussions that we've been having that I want to share, but I really appreciate coming off of your last point, which really was that water harvesting is a step that we have to look forward to. One of the points that has come up in the discussion here is, particularly as storms get more intense, inevitably there's going to be a line in which all of our best efforts are not going to be enough. We know flooding is a real thing. What we do know is that the majority of the practices that are implemented at the moment are not green infrastructure and are not watershed restoration. The tools that are available to flood engineers now with green infrastructure and watershed restoration are very limited. Just doing H&H, hydrology and hydraulics. The models that are available, there are practices out there. You can develop curve numbers to actually look at the potential of watershed restoration. But ultimately, the question is, how can we build the models? Oh, fantastic, Peter, perfect timing.
Peter, that.
How can we build the models? And when I say models, I'm talking about actual projects on the ground that can be examples for where we need to go. Those specifications that both you and Van are talking about, the best practices. And I'd like to ask Peter to talk a little bit about the meetings that we've been having regarding the idea of restarting the flood authority in the region, and talk about some of your experience in the city in terms of where you think the city should go or where the engineering world should go to actually try to bring these practices more, to make them more accessible to engineers and to agency folks and so forth.
Yeah, the idea behind bringing that group back, the flood authority, is to get more people involved with stormwater. Because as it is now, we have, the city, they have their CIP projects, which are large projects, concrete, as Vance would say. And so they think on a huge scale, whereas there's a lot of problems within the city that are existing that aren't part of new projects. So to get the people involved on the community level within these communities that say, hey, we want this green stormwater infrastructure in our neighborhood over here, we think it would benefit. On a committee like that, you would have more ground roots action like that, where you could implement some of this stuff. As Vance said, it's really bureaucratic to retrofit green infrastructure when the city's projects are new projects, I mean, that's where we want the green infrastructure is to come in as new projects, but it's very hard to retrofit. The city moves forward on CIP, which is new projects. So as a group, much like the flood commissions or the flood authority and Albuquerque, these groups can get together and say, hey, we want to acquire this open space, and then say we can take care of it and we can implement these green infrastructure practices on that level. So to take ownership, the community takes ownership and basically implements these things that the city really is having a hard trouble to do right at this moment, because these are new practices, and it's hard to implement new practices with existing standards. We have updated our standards in our, but it's not as dynamic as the processes that you've been explaining, Mike and Vance. There's a lot of permitting involved. There's a lot, like Vance said, a lot of bureaucracy. So to have this stuff done on a more ground level, community-wide, neighborhood-wide, I think is the way to go. And those kind of decisions can be made with an authority because they're using different monies, they're getting grants, they're not so much taking away from some of the monies that are like in a general fund. So I think if we have some of these projects on the ground level and that are successful, I think it'll spawn more. And I use Albuquerque as an example because they have a really good open space. They've acquired a lot of their lands that are mainly just for our drainage areas that aren't useful in other ways. So we need to do that with our arroyos. Our arroyos are in our natural state, a lot of them, but they're, as it is now, they're not being maintained properly. So to enhance those open spaces and arroyos, I think would be very beneficial to the city as far as drainage and having green stormwater infrastructure. So the authority would, I think, take care of a lot of those things. And I think the city could actually embrace that, and it would bring the people back into the decision making of a lot of these problems we're having that are existing that aren't being taken care of. So.
Are you thinking about using the authority from the last legislative session to form stormwater utilities?
They haven't gotten to that far discussion. Stormwater utilities, as far as based on like impervious surface, is that where you're thinking?
No, the 2025 legislative session, I apologize, I don't have it, the citation off the top of my head, put in the New Mexico state annotated statutes the authority that municipalities could create stormwater utilities, because right now Sandoval County, Bernalillo County, and Las Cruces had that 1970 statute that you could form a flood control, but the statute that passed this year is one of the challenges to most cities is stormwater gets under parks and under roads and under municipal development, and so you're competing for monies, and so the idea was you could form a utility, much like you have the authority to form a wastewater utility or potable drinking water utility, that you could create it as a specific utility, and then through your assessor's office potentially have like mill levies as a way to fund it. Because right now I think one of the challenges for any governmental agency for stormwater is it ends up being chunked out, like you're working with your equivalent of your municipal development or whoever, and your planning and your zoning and your parks and rec and your roads, and no one, stormwater sort of taking money like roads, we want to build roads, and parks, we want to build parks. And
stormwater is out of sight, out of mind when it's not raining. Like this year with our recent rains, we've had so much attention and, hey, we got a problem here, we got an issue here, and it's like when people are aware of stormwater, it gets attention the way it deserves. And the utility is a perfect example because Rhonda's program, she has water conservation, the utility department allocates a fund, a program for that, a budget, and and it creates its own little entity. With stormwater, it doesn't. It's just like, oh, well, if we have some funding for that, we can have a program here for that. But if it's not raining, if there's not an issue, then it's just out of sight, out of mind. So a utility is, people don't think of stormwater as a utility, but they should, because
It requires infrastructure.
Yeah.
All of the, like everything we talked about, even though it's small scale, it's still an infrastructure investment.
it's a proactive thing to have. And like what Vance was showing with those giant concrete ponds, that's a reactive response to a situation. And taking, El Paso had a utility, but they threw a bunch of money and say, hey, we'll solve this problem. But they're really not solving the problem. They're solving an immediate maybe problem, but they're creating long-term problems with a utility that the people have involvement with and some voice to. They can come up with ideas and programs, budget, and kind of foresee problems before they happen. And that's the whole thing with stormwater is people don't, until it floods. I mean, that's how Albuquerque's flood program started, was they had a huge flood. And then, well, let's create an authority. Well, Cruces followed suit in the 70s, early 70s, and basically mimicked Albuquerque's flood arroyo plan, but it never took off here for I don't know, it was before my time, but maybe because the town was much smaller and they didn't have a similar open space where they're acquiring open space and creating a bigger program. But the utility is very important. That's a good thing you brought up
And
there.
I would also look at
Scafco.
Yep, Scafco.
I always tell people Albuquerque's not necessarily the best place to use, and it's and without curriculum there, but soy volcano, but like we're half the state population, and so there's financial things that Albuquerque has. But Scafco, like a lot of what you described about the arroyos, Scafco's done a lot, like Amaca, because it has a built environment, it has the built-in concrete conduits. They can't really backwards do that. But Scafco, what they've done, because Scafco also has sort of some of the same growth properties that Las Cruces does with new housing. Scafco's done a lot of work utilizing the existing arroyos and incorporating them into the system and like putting in the basins to help with their MS4 to like flush stuff out so it doesn't go into Rio. And so
Yeah, that's what we have going for us here, is not growing as fast as Albuquerque, or El Paso, where we have to throw in a bunch of concrete and just divert it to the river or somewhere. We still have a lot of our arroyos in a somewhat natural state. I mean, they're not concretized or channelized, so we need to really take advantage of that and maintain those, enhance those, and create more proper drainage ways and better stormwater drainage in our city with the existing natural arroyos that we have.
the Scafco did that a lot with their natural arroyos where it's open space and so it preserves it, and you should still have that natural system, the sinuosity and meandering, and we can go a little crazy. We don't worry about taking out the
Yeah.
why some of you guys think on that.
So
Seen some pretty amazing research that Scafco's done as well, looking at the amount of recharge that's coming from the arroyos itself, which great point that's a better example for Las Cruces than Amalca, than Albuquerque's flood authority. So Peter's talking about a flood authority where you would have a board that's elected. They wouldn't be city folks. They'd be hopefully folks that have some experience and so forth. I think we all want to elect Gary Esslinger to the board, and Mike, I guess you're in El Paso and you're in Silver City, so you guys are great board members. But any other final questions? We're gonna wrap up in 5 minutes and hit the road. But questions for these folks? The idea of us turning back towards nature, understanding the natural systems, working with the systems. We all know it takes a hybrid approach. It's going to take It's like the release valve. When you know that the storm is bigger than the natural system can handle, then you've got your engineering solutions. But if we do the natural system, if we do it properly, and what tells us that it's not being done properly is every little bit of erosion along the way, every part of the city where you've got stormwater buildup, all of those are the important indicators that something's out of whack and something's not stable. Any other questions about how to kind of steer the ship towards really integrating the natural systems and looking at those engineered solutions? I think a big part of it, to me, a lot of what we talked about today is still somewhat reactive because we're capturing what's already entered the system. And this also comes from my permitting stand. Don't let contamination lead your side. I call it the thing. Pick up after yourself. Don't let it lead. And so I think a large part of it is also we need to start looking at doing your rainwater harvesting so it on site so it never even leaves your property. Now, and so I think that's the next step after. Like I'd love to see more of it now, where it's like you don't have your stormwater leave your property. You have
Or your watershed.
or your watershed. Like you have either built into your neighborhood the rain, like not just the retention pond. There's a retention pond, but like have the rain garden in your neighborhood. If you're an industry, capture the stormwater before it leaves your property.
There's places in other states where you are taxed if you emit stormwater onto the property.
There you go. There's
The collection capacity of the rainwater of the stormwater basin, as they're called, that's in the back of the lot behind the building, if that capacity was distributed throughout the property to grow trees and shade the parking lot, would be one way to change that. You could still have that capacity and not let that would be the stacking functions part of the seventh principle. It's like, use the water that's landing on your property to do something else with it other than just shunt it to the back of the lot.
Change the utility billing rates. Make the first 500 gallons a month per person free. And then put a corner in that, make it a hockey shaped graph so that if you're using water for landscaping, you're going to pay. And so then people are going to creatively try get water off their roof, get water off the street, so that our individual initiative can guide us.
We had a landscape ordinance probably back in the 80s that came into the city. And just by having that ordinance where commercial properties had to have so much landscaping, people had creatively created their own green infrastructure because they were like, I got to have this landscape now. Well, let's start collecting water for runoff. And so there's some sites around the city that were creative enough to capture that runoff just through that one landscape ordinance that we had that wasn't even planned for green infrastructure. And so, like what Vance is saying, if you have an impervious surface, like utility or something like that, people will be creative and try to, utilize that runoff and try to have less wasteful pervious surface areas.
Yeah, every bit makes a difference. Peter and a private citizen that's got a planning background and a stormwater background, and other folks in the city are coming together to submit a project to the drought resiliency effort. The RFPs are going to be open at the beginning of November. The projects will be due, the RFPs will be due January 29th. And what we want to do is pull together a project or a set of projects that then a flood authority that could actually help build the flood authority, give something to the flood authority to do, integrate it into the city programs. All right, we're going to head out